Wowza, shock and awe. The mainstream media has been whining about not getting a chance to ask President Trump questions. They hounded the president for a press conference. Well, he gave them one, and one for the ages. Here are some of the highlights.
The press has become so dishonest that if we don't talk about it, we are doing a tremendous disservice to the American people. Tremendous disservice. The media is trying to attack our administration because they know we are following through on pledges that we made, and they're not happy about it for whatever reason. Well, the Daily New York Times wrote a big, long front-page story yesterday, and it was very much discredited, as you know. It's a joke. I don't mind bad stories. I can handle a bad story better than anybody, as long as it's true. I watch CNN. It's so much anger and hatred. The tone is such hatred. I'm changing it from fake news, though.
Doesn't that undermine...
Very fake news. I sort of understand there's a certain bias, maybe by Jeff or somebody, for whatever reason. And I understand that. But you've got to be at least a little bit fair. And that's why the public sees it. They see it. They see it's not fair. You take a look at some of your shows, and you see the bias and the hatred. And the public is smart. They understand it.
The president stayed at the podium for more than an hour and took literally dozens of questions from the full spectrum of media, broadcast, cable, print, bloggers. The room at times looked like a WWE arena, with the mainstream media having fits about being called out for their unfair reporting of the Trump administration. This was vintage Trump, though. It was campaign Trump. Donald Trump was in his element, and it was awesome to watch. KG, it was almost like, you know, that whack-a-mole game? One stands up, boom, he gets smacked down. The next one stands up, boom, he gets smacked down.
Except he was
they
like
were asking for this.
Edward Scissorhands, and he had like 10 arms and was whacking all over the place. Anyway, it was very funny. When I was watching, I was thinking to myself, wow, this is wildly entertaining. Then I thought to myself, wait a second, this is supposed to be, a news conference and answering the questions. But I think he had also come through, a tough week, and with everything that happened with Flynn, and he was like, enough already, and lay down the law. But what was interesting to me is there was a little bit of a convivial atmosphere. And when he said, I'm changing the name, very fake news. Even Jim Acosta, we didn't show the rest of that clip, laughed, and the rest of the place laughed, and so that loosened it up a little bit, and there was kind of an understanding like, okay, this is how it's going to be. But guess what? He answered all the questions. He was up there for over an hour, and great. I thought that was good. It reminded me a little bit of the free accessibility when he was out on the campaign and everybody was there and able to ask what they liked. So I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, Dana, during the press conference, I had Twitter rolling, and I've never seen the Twitter machine roll as fast as it was. People were tweeting like crazy. The Trump supporters loved it, everything he was doing, and the media types. I mean, I follow a lot of media types. They were aghast.
Well, there was a little bit of something for everybody. I think that, interestingly, there's a lot of news that actually came out of it, but I was describe it as if you imagine Bambi on ice chasing a marble. That's what the press conference was like, because there was so much stuff that was covered. Alex Acosta, who was the main purpose of the press conference, was to announce his new Labor Department nominee. He's an amazing guy with a great background with Cuban immigrants, who I think his grandmother became a citizen late in her life. And it's like a beautiful story of success, an American success story, who had worked also at the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Later on, the president talked about that Obamacare replacement expected mid-March. He said also that there will be a new executive order on the extreme vetting on the immigration piece. So that was news. And also then afterwards, the president leaves and he rescinds the coal mining rule from the Obama administration. All of that stuff happened in one day. So that's their frustration, is that they're actually doing really big things and they can't get out of their own way because, yes, he answered a lot of questions about the Russia ties, Mike Flynn, etc. Just before we came to air, the Washington Post breaks a story with an additional possible development or wrinkle in the Michael Flynn story about his FBI discussions and whether he had denied to them that he talked about sanctions with them. So I appreciate that they've done a lot and there's a lot of news out there. I like it that he can kind of kill people with kindness, although if you're on the receiving end of it, it doesn't feel kind often, but he has that ability to be charming. but you also have to nail this stuff down, because if not, it's going to continue to follow you.
Greg, couple thoughts. The mainstream media has called Donald Trump thin-skinned. He won't answer questions. They've been begging for this. They got a lot of it. But in the aftermath of that, they were really ticked off. It was almost like he was insulting the mainstream media for calling them out on some of the things that he felt they were mistreating him on.
I thought it was incredibly entertaining. I really think he could host a reality show if he wanted to.
Good idea.
But I kept thinking how many average Americans have wanted to say stuff like this to the press corps because they've been, their questions never get asked. But I want to focus on like the media, because for 8 years, essentially, they've been interviewing themselves. When you look, when a New York Times editor looks at President Obama, it's like they could have easily been roommates. They probably were roommates. Obama could have been a cultures editor at the New York Times. But now they're faced with a creature that is nothing like them. And how you feel about Donald Trump's performance depends on who you have more in common with. So if you have more in common with Donald Trump, meaning like he's kind of a blustery businessman who stream of consciousness, likes to joke around, or you're like a highly educated reporter in the Beltway or New York or the New York Times, you will either love him or you will hate it. But the one thing I find most kind of interesting about it, it's a complete reversal of the Republican president-reporter antagonism. Previously, the president was always the piñata, and the reporters would get up there and just pepper him and hit him and go like this. But he reversed it, and he treated the press like a confetti-covered donkey filled with cheap candy and just kept hitting it over and over again. And it's like, and it's true there was other things they were saying that were ridiculous, but it was just at the same time, he was in his element. And I think we found out who should be his press secretary.
He should.
He should,
yeah.
Because he's the only person who can explain himself. He's so mysterious and kind of abstract that you can't really create an ideal copy. No one can actually do him. Even Alec Baldwin can't do him. But so it's like the person who should be going out there every day and explaining Donald Trump is Donald Trump.
And the way I understand it went down is early this morning he was so sick of some of the things that they were saying about him. He said, I'm going to do a press conference, and I'm going to answer a lot of questions. One, Steve Bannon last week said that he feels that the press has now become the opposition party. Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen this morning outlined that, and they would agree. Has the press diminished the legitimacy, or at least the influence, of the Democrat Party? No. No one's talking about the Democrats pushing back on Donald Trump. It's the media pushing back on him.
Yeah, but I don't think that diminishes the Democrats necessarily. I think at the moment, Donald Trump is quite content to diminish the media. I mean, he went after CNN quite directly and said they're fake news, they're filled with hate, all that kind of stuff, even as he loves Fox and Friends, apparently. That's his favorite. He likes Fox and Friends. But I thought, to me, he went after Hillary Clinton repeatedly. He went after Barack Obama. He said he inherited a mess.
That's what Obama said about Bush, too.
Right.
Yeah, and then of course, he went after the whole idea that the intelligence community is leaking and hurting him, right? So he has lots of people that he doesn't like. And today, you got full flavor. You know who he doesn't like. But the surprising part was he still likes the Russians, and he still likes General Flynn.
Isn't this smart, though? Isn't picking the media as your adversary rather than the Democrats? I think this is great strategy, right? I mean, there were Democrats all afternoon coming out with a response, even Republicans coming out with a response to the press conference. Most of it, a lot of it negative, and no one really cares because they cared to hear what the mainstream media was saying about it.
Well, it was like when you mentioned WWE. A really successful wrestler picks an adversary, and you could tell it's good. I mean, even when he was making fun of Jim Acosta, he was complimenting him at the same time, and you could tell that they were playing their roles, just like professional wrestlers play a role. He's playing President Trump, and he's going to yell at you, and it was so clearly. It wasn't really as adversarial as it seemed.
Didn't he set this up, KG, though? Didn't he? The media bit, right? So he knows that they are generally not liked. I mean, they have a lower approval rating than most things in the world, including Congress.
Right, and that was really consistent during the campaign.
But by picking them, it's bipartisan. You can have a disdain for that same group, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Yeah, no, it was smart. And again, he played himself today, and nobody does Trump better than the president himself. And what I thought was interesting too is he said, he goes, and I'm having a good time. He's like, I'm actually having a good minute. I'm going to enjoy this.
20 minutes later.
And I think he was. And then he's like going and doing it, and he's like, but they're going to say Trump rant. for sure enough, one of the headlines was Trump rants at the press conference. But, you know, it's like no matter what he does, I feel like they're not going to be happy with him if he stays up there for an hour and answers questions and actually tells the truth and doesn't pretend to like people he doesn't like. But nevertheless, he called on CNN. He spent a considerable amount of time with Jim Acosta, who handled himself very well. And he's been taking hits, too. Poor guy in Saturday Night Live. Remember they put him in the cage and whatever.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
But the question to my mind is, so he makes fun of Hillary Clinton and the reset button, that stupid plastic button he said, right? And then,
he won, you even laughed.
Yeah, but I laugh, but I think to myself, so it's like a stream of consciousness. He's kind of like just going off, and he's there for an hour and 17 minutes, I think it was, Eric. But so at some point you think, really, that's an American press conference? I mean, we used to make fun of countries that had things like this.
He's the Fox News president. Everything that he says, we've said.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's like, I think I heard that.
But I like you on TV. I didn't know that I would. But he says.
Oh, you would vote for him for president?
That's the question. Would I vote for Greg for president?
Of course you would. I would be a great president.
I would, but I must say, and then he goes off and he starts this thing about, oh, gee, you know, to me, it's so much. There was so much in that press conference.
Can I just point out, Dana, that
overloaded us.
NBC took a shot at him, took a blatant shot at him, and later on he goes back and says to the guy, "Hey, we good here?" And he has a little fun with them. I mean, there is a talent in
so in Art of the Deal, he wrote, and he's since said, I think several times, that when it comes to publicity, the only thing worse than having bad press is that nobody's talking about you at all. So he needed to change the subject today. If he did that, I don't know what subject's going to come out of it. There's so many things that came out of it. But here's the thing about the opposition party, if it is the media, a rising tide lifts all boats. Subscriptions are up across the board for all mediums, from internet websites that require a subscription, hard copy newspapers.
The New York Times is not failing.
The failing New York Times.
Everybody is doing better, so he has made journalism great again.
But Rachel Maddow, she's getting numbers.
Do you notice
How'd that
what
happen?
no one's talking about? Do you know what no one is talking about? I'm going to say it again, Juan. The Democrats. No one's talking about the Democrat Party. Who's bubbling up? Who's important?
Well,
I think this is brilliant strategy.
He took away their relevancy.
But I got to tell you something. I think the Democrats are pretty happy.
You do?
Yes.
I've never met a Democrat or a politician, for that matter, who wasn't happy, who didn't want to be on TV, who didn't want to be have something negative to say about him, or vice versa.
I think right now the Democrats are happy to be hanging low because they have no idea what they're gonna do.
Not only that, I mean, President Trump said today his Rasmussen numbers are 55% approval. And obviously, he was upset by the Gallup numbers that had him in the high 30s, I think, and the least popular new president in a long time. But you look at the Democrats, Eric, and the Democrats are like, hey, we are able to label this resist, because there's so many Democrats who are excited, activated, organizing against Trump.
It just feels like they've been marginalized, at least for now. You got to leave it there.